Alright, this is going to be a quick one. We're just going to talk about how to design the perfect dark mode interface for your app. Now, most designers suck at this, alright? Most designers don't know how to create a good dark mode interface. So, we're going to cover 4 major tactics that you can use to create or improve your current dark mode interface for whatever website or app that you're currently building, alright? So, I have this quick little project here that I just hacked together with a couple of components, and we're going to go through them, and I'm going to explain these 4 tactics and how they work and how I've applied them to these components and how you can do the same for your application. So I've already started this. Now let's open this up. So this, you can see over here, this is just a very simple dark mode interface, right? We're going to go through everything that I did over here, and then we're also going to look at another component completely different from this one and see what I did over there as well. So most designers think that they can just invert the colors and call it a day, right? They think, okay, we're using pure white as the background. If I just use pure black as the background in my dark mode interface, that's basically all done, right? That is not the case. You can't just naively invert the colors and call it a day. So you can see over here that this is a pretty decent dark mode interface, and you can probably tell I'm not using pure black as the background here, right? And that's the first tactic that I want to discuss. You do not want to use pure black as your background or pure white as the text. You can use pure white as the text, but you don't want to use pure black as the background. Why? Because pure black and pure white have such a harsh contrast that it's just unpleasant to look at, unpleasant to read. So this is not pure black, this is a shade of gray basically, and I'm going to show you what happens if I instead just use, let's say, pure black instead of this gray 900 color, right? Let's instead use pure black, and you'll see it looks much more horrible. So okay, that just changed the sidebar, but you can see it already looks so much worse, right? If I go over here and change the, where is it? Change the actual background of the content as well down here, and we set this to black. Looks horrible, doesn't it? It's worse to read, it's not good to read, it's unpleasant, it's just horrible, right? So let's change that back. So this is the first tactic that I want to cover. You do not want to use pure black as the background for your page or your elements, because the contrast will be too strong and it will just be harsh and unpleasant to read. So that's the first tactic. Alright, use a dark shade of gray for the background because that's just easier on the eyes, it's much more pleasant to look at and read. Do not just use pure black, alright? Don't fall into the trap of naively inverting your colors, going from pure white to pure black and stuff. Do not just naively invert your colors and call it a day. Use a dark shade of gray instead of using pure black for the backgrounds. That's the first tactic. Secondly, what I want to talk about is the icons over here, alright? So when you're designing a dark mode interface, you want to really pay attention to the contrast between the background and the foreground, alright? And the thing with icons is they can have, especially if you're using heavily outlined or filled icons, they can have some really strong contrast against the background, and we want to avoid things like that in dark mode interfaces. So you can see over here I'm only using outlined icons, I'm not using filled icons over here, alright? And that's the major key here. If you're using a light mode interface, filled icons can make sense, but if you're using a dark mode interface, generally you should avoid using heavily outlined or heavily filled icons, alright? Try to just use outlined icons like the ones I'm using here. And even in these outlined icons, I'm not using pure white as the text color. You can see over here, this is where I'm rendering the actual icon. You can see that even in the dark mode interface, I'm using the gray 300 color. I'm not using pure white. So it's very similar to typography, right? We want to lower the contrast, and the way to do that is to just use outlined icons instead of filled icons or very heavily filled icons, right? We want to use outlined icons in dark mode interfaces. That was the second tactic. Now, the third tactic that I want to show you is related to images and how we can render the images in dark mode. So for that, I need to head into the other component that I have over here. I'll comment this and render this skeleton cards component. And what I want you to focus on is these images over here, right? So this is just a bunch of random courses over here, and this is the image for each course. Now I'm doing some very subtle changes to these images. I'll show you what I mean. If I go up here where I render the images, you can see that, and we don't need this, but you can see that in the dark mode, what I'm doing is I'm lowering the brightness a bit and increasing the contrast a little bit, right? I'm setting the contrast to 1.2 and decreasing the brightness of each image to 0.8, right? And the reason I do this is because if you're using super bright images on a super dark background, it's just not going to look good, right? It's just not going to look good. The contrast will be too strong. Similar to what we talked about in typography just now, the contrast, we want to make sure that the contrast is really like pleasant to look at. We don't want super strong contrast that's not just as unpleasant to look at. We want to avoid things like that. So the thing I do with images over here is I simply lower the brightness and increase the contrast a little bit over here, which just helps to make them more comfortable to look at in a dark mode interface. If I instead remove these filters, there we go, I save this, you'll see that they get a lot brighter, right? And it's a very subtle change, but it's just one of those things that adds up into a really great design, right? If I go back and add that, you can see it gets a bit darker and it just looks a bit better, right? It looks like it actually fits on this dark mode interface, right? And on a completely different side note, it's small changes like these that when you look at them in the context of a whole UI, that's when they all add up and compound into this huge, amazing, elite design, right? It's just hundreds and hundreds of tiny improvements like these that when you look at them in the context of a whole UI, that's when you see and you realize that this is a really elite UI. But it's not the product of one major thing. It's more like hundreds and hundreds of tiny changes that we made similar to these that just add up into that elite UI. So I hope I'm making sense here, but basically what you want to do is you can have these bright images on where am I? You can have those bright images on light mode. If I go over here and turn on light mode in my computer, see, this looks fine, right? These images look fine right now, but if I open up dark mode instead, now they're not so well. It's a very subtle change. Again, I don't blame you if you don't notice it, but if you just add these filters over here, they just look so much better on a dark mode interface, don't they? So that's the third tactic that I want to cover. And finally, the fourth tactic is something I've already shown you, but not really talked about. It's to use the prefers color scheme media query in CSS to automatically set the correct color theme for each user. So you saw here that I changed my color theme to light, right? And the UI automatically updated, right? That's what I'm talking about here. If I go back over here and show you that tasks list again, see how it's automatically showing it to me in light theme? That's what I'm talking about. So if I go back over here and change it to dark mode, it's gonna show up the dark mode UI. And that's what we want to build here. We want to use the prefers color scheme media query, which I'll show you over here. This is a special media query in CSS that will just check what the default color theme is at the operating system level. So I'm on Windows right now and my color theme is set to dark, right? This media query is going to give me the value dark, and then I can use that to design the dark mode interface, right? And this is how you actually use this media query in CSS, right? You want to use media prefers color scheme. If it is dark, then you just use the dark mode styling for your elements, right? Now I'm using Tailwind, so what I can do is I can add this dark pseudo class over here, right here, and then just add the styling, right? So this is kind of a shorthand if you're using Tailwind, but the CSS version is the same. You just use media prefers color scheme and dark, and then you just add the dark mode styling. So this is super important because this way your user doesn't have to go and manually switch the color themes, right? If they prefer a dark mode, then you can give them a dark mode automatically. If they instead prefer a light mode, which I don't know what kind of person prefers light mode, but If they do that, you can give them the light theme automatically. So always make sure to use this media query, because it's just a free win for your user experience, right? You want to improve the user experience as much as possible, and this is just a very simple and easy and quick way to do that, right? We want to reduce the effort that our users have to put in to use our website, and this is just one way we can automatically improve the user experience, automatically make the experience better for them. So make sure you do this as well. And yeah, that's all 4 tactics covered. Apply all of these at whatever dark mode interface you're designing right now, and I guarantee it's going to look a lot better than it is now. That's all for today. Like if you like the video, subscribe if you want to. Check out my website, link in the description if you want to work with me or something like that. And yeah, that's all. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.